I work in crisis communications. That is to say, I help our clients to deal with the media and social media pressures associated with classic vessel incidents, collisions, groundings, fires, fatalities. This is the bread and butter of what we do and used to be almost all we did. But increasingly, the challenges facing shipping are changing. So, what am I doing on the panel talking about sustainability? Well, sustainability is increasingly coloring the perceptions of our industry. And the perceptions of our industry have a major impact on my job, which is to deal with us when we're in the limelight, when we're in the spotlight, when we are in trouble. Looking at the other category, the 10%, that is increasingly a large portion of what we deal with, and increasingly it is part of the sustainability debate, whether we talk about environmental sustainability or other forms of sustainability. Over the last decade, global interest in shipping and sustainability in all the different forms that that might take has increased significantly. In fact, it's almost doubled over the last 10 years if we measure it in terms of Google search interest. Now, obviously, that's only one way of measuring it, but it gives us a useful insight in terms of what people are actively going out and inquiring about, actively going out and seeking information about. And shipping is doing a lot. There's a lot of innovation happening, both on the engineering level. We have clients who are investing in wind-assisted propulsion or improving their energy management systems or improving their hull dynamics, their hull efficiencies. There is a lot that is happening, but there is a problem in the sense that we know that's happening, and maybe it's not happening fast enough, but progress is being made. But what isn't happening is that that message is getting out. So the headlines we still see are things like this. The progress towards, the sulfur cap is marred by debates around scrubbers, debates around regulations and using them, largely because people don't understand and haven't been properly communicated with in terms of what's happening. We see environmental activists choosing to target vessels in our industry because they're seen as easy targets, and people tend to be sympathetic to activists who target vessels. Not in our industry. In our industry, we look at this many times and go, this is terrible, this is hazardous. But outside of our industry, public sentiment is generally hugely favorable. And in fact, in this case here, the coverage of this incident was overwhelmingly dominated by Greenpeace's version of events. Of the 500+ articles that were published, almost all of them had 80% of the copy, 80% of the words directly lifted from statements that were put out by Greenpeace. They controlled the narrative because they were prepared and they're better at dealing with the media than our industry tends to be. And we also see that with the recent cases in Brazil. Most of you, I think, will be aware that there was an oil spill in Brazil. Following that spill, there was lots of allegations. The officials and non-official parties in Brazil came out and named certain tankers. It was that tanker. It was that tanker. Usually these allegations were completely baseless, and in some cases even laughable. We dealt with one case where the tanker was 10,000 miles away at the time of the alleged spill. And yet, people believed it. They believed it because the truth is, we have a little bit of a reputation problem as an industry. And we really shouldn't. Our industry has done a huge amount to improve. I'm not going to go back to the Clipper days. I'm just going to go back 30, 40, 50 years. This is data put together by ITOF that looks at the number of oil spills over time relative to the amount of oil cargoes that are carried. This is a massive success story. Our safety has improved dramatically. And it's not just our safety, it's also our environmental sustainability relative to other modes of transport and relative to our previous standards. We all know these sorts of figures. We've seen these before. They're well passed around in our industry, but sadly, they're not particularly well passed around outside of our industry. If you want to move cargo from point A to point B, something that is not going to change in the foreseeable future, that is a fixture of the global economy. We're not going to get away from that. The best way to do it, by far, is by vessel. And yet, public perception somehow doesn't quite match that. If we do a comparison in terms of public perceptions, and in this case I'm going to do it based on media coverage, of aviation versus shipping, we see an interesting story. In the line I have up on the screen there at the moment, that's the line for aviation that looks at the last decade. Over the last decade, how much of the coverage of that industry, how much of the media attention of aviation has focused on aviation's contribution to climate change. They're causing global warming. And it might surprise you to see that, in fact, that line has trended down. Despite the fact that aviation is burning more fuel now than ever, that line has trended down in terms of public perception. Add the line for shipping, something went wrong for us. It's interesting to try and speculate why the difference, because 5 years ago we were roughly at the same point in terms of public perception as aviation. And then aviation seemed to figure something out. They figured out that they needed to be doing more to communicate with concerned stakeholders, and they did so. Shipping didn't. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but it creates a problem for us, because when I go into any crisis now, helping to represent any one of our clients, people have a negative perception of our industry. The problem isn't just environmental either. We're all aware of lots of issues, whether it's crew abandonment or vessel scrapping or tax evasion. There are lots of issues that our industry gets negative attention for. Some of those deserved, some of those perhaps not deserved. And as with all things, generally these are a small percentage of operators, a small number of what we might call bad apples that are tarnishing the reputations of the rest of us. So shipping has an image problem, and it means that whenever I try and say, look what a great job we're doing dealing with this problematic situation, I face an uphill battle. And every time that there's a poorly managed incident, people's belief that our industry is problematic is reinforced, and my job becomes harder. All of our jobs become harder. But perhaps surprisingly, there is a sort of solution that comes out of our crises. Let me explain what I mean. Crises are a sort of opportunity because they attract attention. If you want to win a battle for hearts and minds, if you want to convince people that we are a positive industry, you need to get them to look at us. You need to get them to start paying attention. And people pay attention when things go wrong in our industry. The pictures are spectacular. Not spectacular to the people who own the vessel or who are on board, but from a media standpoint, the pictures are spectacular. These sorts of images go round the world in an instant, and people start paying attention to our industry. The question is, what do we do with that attention? Far too often, our industry has gone, hide, move away, don't say anything. The less we say, everyone will look away. But with an image like this, people aren't going to look away. People are going to write the story. Journalists are going to cover the situation, and so they should. And so we have two choices. We can either engage and tell our story, or do what too many have done in the past, which is to stand back and hope to hide away in the shadows, which simply leaves room for everyone else who might be critical of our industry to step in and have their side of the story told with our pictures. Other organizations seem to recognize this, and other organizations have to work much harder than we do. This is a campaign from Heathrow. Some of you probably have flown through Heathrow recently. They've invested a lot in their carbon strategy, having a conversation about the elephant in the airport, as they put it. They are investing a lot of money in advertising about this. Another example, H&M, one of the largest clothing manufacturers in the world, who has been criticized for being poor on labor standards, poor on environmental standards. They've come out with a campaign talking about their conscious line. Their conscious line is sustainable, and they're saying, look at all the wonderful things we're doing. Other industries do this. They recognize that they need to spend huge amounts of money in order to get the attention they need to change the narrative about their companies and their industries. We don't need to invest millions. We just need to be prepared. So how do we engage when something goes wrong? How do we engage better with our stakeholders when things are going well? One of the simplest things we can do is take advantage of those moments when we are in the spotlight, when we can't avoid being in the spotlight. Take advantage of those times when we can seize the moment, because if any one shipping company seizes the moment and deals with the situation really well, we all benefit. No shipping company is an island. No shipping company is alone in the public perception battle. We're all in it together. So what does a shipping company need to do in order to be prepared to seize the moment? To some extent, they just need to be prepared, and they need to be willing to actually take the steps that are required. But I think there are 4 check marks, 4 tick boxes that every company should look to measure if they're prepared and make sure they're ready to move forward. You need to have a plan in place to make sure that you are ready to engage with the media. Simply walking away from today's presentation going, "Good idea Dustin had, we'll do that next time," not going to work. That needs to be backed up with actual templates, what we call a communications handbook, something that's actually going to make sure that you are ready and able to respond with concrete messaging, concrete examples of what your organization's done. And for that to be effective, you need to back that up with training. We in our industry don't deal with the media very often, and that's a good thing sometimes. But when we do have to deal with the media, doing it well makes a difference, and that's only going to happen through training. And finally, have some support in place to make sure that you're ready to respond. Work with a company that can provide that expertise. Thank you very much. I look forward to questions in the panel.